The night everything changed, he locked my son alone out in the cold while a storm tore our family apart. After midnight, the truth finally came out, and I realized something had been terribly wrong at home for a long time. One phone call, one family secret, and one heartbreaking moment made me understand the signs I should have seen all along. My name is Claire Holloway. I was 36 years old when my husband locked my 9-year-old son outside during the coldest night of the year. By morning, my child was in the hospital with frostbite on his fingers and a body temperature so low the doctors said another hour outside could have killed him. But the part that destroyed me wasn't the snow. It wasn't the police lights. It wasn't even the divorce papers that came later. It was what my son whispered from that hospital bed, while holding my hand with shaking fingers. "I tried to be good enough for him, Mom." For 3 years, my son begged for love from a man who only knew how to control people. And for 3 years, I kept telling myself things would get better. I ignored the warning signs. The fear in my son's eyes. The way he apologized for everything. The way he flinched whenever my husband raised his voice. Until the night a failed math test, a snowstorm, and one cruel decision changed our lives forever. What my husband did that night led to a police investigation, a CPS case, and a truth about our family that I can never forget. Because when they found my son curled up under a frozen playground 2 miles from home, he wasn't crying. He was apologizing for making everyone mad. And that was the moment I realized my child had been surviving emotional abuse while I was busy trying to save my marriage. My name is Claire Holloway, and I was 36 years old when my husband locked my 9-year-old son outside during the coldest night of the year. By morning, my child was in the hospital with frostbite on 2 fingers and a body temperature so low the doctors said another hour outside could have killed him. But the part that still wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning is not the hospital, not the police, not even the divorce papers. It is the moment my son looked at me from that hospital bed and whispered, "I tried to be good enough for him, Mom." No child should ever have to earn love. And yet my son spent 3 years trying. 3 years trying to convince a grown man not to hate him. 3 years failing. And the worst part? I helped create the situation that trapped him there. Because I ignored every warning sign, every excuse, every bruise hidden behind accidents, every silence that grew longer and heavier until my son barely spoke above a whisper inside his own house. People always ask how intelligent women end up in terrible marriages. The answer is simple. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, one compromise at a time, one excuse at a time, one apology at a time, until one day you wake up and realize your child is terrified of the person sleeping in the room next to yours. And by then, leaving feels harder than surviving. At least that's what I told myself. Until the night my son almost died. I met Daniel Mercer when I was 31 years old and exhausted from trying to survive life alone. My first husband, Aaron, died in a highway accident when our son Eli was 4. One rainy night. One drunk driver. One state trooper standing on my porch at 11:18 p.m. After that, life became bills and grief and survival. I worked as a pharmacy technician during the day and cleaned office buildings at night while my mother watched Eli after school. Every morning I woke up tired. Every night I fell asleep scared. Scared of money. Scared of loneliness. Scared I was failing my son. Then Daniel appeared. He was calm, steady, patient. A high school history teacher with soft eyes and a slow smile. He brought groceries when Eli got sick. Fixed my leaking sink without being asked. Sat on the floor building Lego sets with Eli for 2 hours straight the first time they met. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway watching them laugh together and thinking, maybe life is finally giving us a break. That thought nearly destroyed us. Daniel never raised his voice during the first year. That is important. Men like him rarely start cruel. Cruelty grows where comfort allows it. First came the corrections. Eli interrupts too much. Eli should say yes, sir. Eli is too emotional for a boy. Small comments. Reasonable comments. The kind people nod along to. Then came the discipline. No dessert for talking back. No cartoons for messy rooms. Corner time for attitude. Again, nothing extreme. Nothing obvious enough to trigger alarm bells. Just enough to slowly change the atmosphere inside the house. Eli became quieter. Careful. He started watching Daniel's face before speaking. like a sailor checking weather before leaving shore. I noticed it. I ignored it. Because Daniel helped with bills. Because he cooked dinner. Because he hugged me when I cried from exhaustion. Because after years of drowning, I wanted so badly to believe someone had finally come to save us. So I explained away the discomfort growing in my chest. That is what denial feels like. Not stupidity. Hope. We married 18 months after meeting. Eli was 6. At the wedding he wore a tiny gray suit and carried the rings with both hands like they were treasure. Daniel knelt during the reception and told him, "I'll always take care of you, buddy." Eli smiled so hard his cheeks turned pink. I have a photo of that moment somewhere in a box I still cannot open. 3 months after the wedding, Daniel moved us into his house outside Indianapolis. Bigger yard, better schools, quiet neighborhood. At first everything looked perfect. Then the rules multiplied. Shoes aligned by the door perfectly. No talking during homework. No snacks outside the kitchen. No toys left in the living room. No baby behavior. Daniel hated crying most of all. "Crying solves nothing," he'd say. One evening Eli fell off his bike and scraped his knee badly enough to bleed through his jeans. He ran toward the porch sobbing. Daniel stopped him halfway across the yard. "You're too old to cry over scratches." Eli tried to swallow the tears immediately, his whole little body shaking from the effort. That image never left me. A child trying harder not to cry than recovering from pain. Later that night I told Daniel he'd been too harsh. Daniel sighed dramatically and rubbed his forehead. "I'm trying to help him become strong, Claire. The world won't baby him forever." And there it was. The trap. Because what kind of mother argues against strength? So again I ignored the feeling in my gut. The emotional distance between Daniel and Eli widened slowly, like cracks in ice. Easy to miss until someone falls through. Daniel never hit him. Not once. That almost made it worse. Because I had no bruises to point at. No broken bones. No visible proof. Just patterns. Eli getting stomachaches before dinner. Eli pretending to sleep when Daniel came home. Eli apologizing constantly. Sorry for spilling milk. Sorry for coughing during movies. Sorry for existing too loudly. One night I overheard him whispering to his stuffed rabbit, "If I'm perfect, maybe he'll like me tomorrow." I stood outside his bedroom door and cried silently into my hand. But still, I stayed. Because Daniel never treated me badly. Not directly. That's another thing people misunderstand. Abusive people often target the safest victim first. And children are easier to control than adults. Especially children desperate for approval. When Eli turned 8, Daniel started coaching his baseball team. From the outside he looked like the ideal stepfather. Other parents loved him. Organized. Disciplined. Reliable. But I saw the difference in how he treated Eli compared to the other boys. Other kids got encouragement. Eli got criticism. Move faster. Pay attention. You embarrassed yourself out there. If Eli missed a catch, Daniel punished him with extra drills after practice while the other boys ate popsicles. One afternoon I arrived early and saw Eli sitting alone on the bench after everyone left. Shoulders hunched. Head down. Daniel stood over him holding a glove. "You think your real dad would be proud of this effort?" I froze. Daniel noticed me instantly and changed expression so fast it felt unreal. Smile. Relaxed shoulders. Warm voice. "Hey honey. We're just practicing." Eli looked at me but said nothing. That silence became the loudest thing in our house. The breaking point came in January. The coldest winter Indiana had seen in years. Snow piled against fences. Roads glazed with ice. Wind sharp enough to hurt your teeth when breathing. Eli had been struggling in math. Not failing. Just struggling. Daniel believed mistakes were laziness. That Friday night, Eli brought home a test score, 72%. Daniel stared at the paper for a long time, then folded it carefully. What happened? Eli looked terrified immediately. I studied. Clearly not enough. I tried really hard. Trying is irrelevant. Results matter. I stepped in gently. It's one test, Daniel. But he ignored me. Go to your room, he told Eli. Dinner passed in tense silence. At 9 p.m. I went upstairs to check on Eli and found him asleep over his math workbook, pencil still in hand. My heart cracked a little. I carried a blanket over and tucked it around him. He woke halfway and whispered, "Do you think Daniel hates me?" I should have answered honestly. Instead, I kissed his forehead and lied. "No, sweetheart. He just wants the best for you." Sometimes mothers lie because the truth is too terrifying to say out loud. The next night, everything exploded. Daniel discovered Eli had hidden the failed math test inside his backpack instead of getting it signed immediately. A terrified child delaying punishment by 12 hours. That was all. But Daniel reacted like betrayal. He dragged Eli into the kitchen holding the crumpled paper. "You lied to me." Eli started crying instantly. I was scared. "And now you're crying instead of taking responsibility." I stepped between them. "Daniel, enough." But Daniel's face had changed. Cold. Rigid. Something ugly beneath the surface finally visible. "He manipulates you with tears, Claire. He's 9. He's weak because nobody forces him to grow up." Eli backed against the refrigerator trembling. "I'm sorry." Daniel pointed toward the back door. "Then maybe you should think about your behavior outside for a while." First I thought he meant the porch. Timeout. 5 minutes. Normal. Then Daniel opened the back door. Snow blew inside instantly. The temperature outside was 8 degrees. I stared at him. "Daniel. He needs consequences. You cannot put him outside. It's 5 minutes." Eli looked at me with absolute terror. And here is the truth I will regret forever. I hesitated. Not because I agreed. Because years of walking carefully around Daniel had trained me to avoid escalation. That hesitation cost my son dearly. Daniel grabbed Eli's winter coat and threw it toward him. "Outside." Eli looked at me one last time. Waiting. Begging silently for me to stop it. I failed him. For 5 seconds I failed him. And children remember 5 seconds forever. Eli stepped outside crying. Daniel shut the door. I moved immediately. "Open it. He needs to calm down. He's terrified. He'll survive 5 minutes." I reached for the lock. Daniel grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to warn. That was the first time he ever touched me with anger. And suddenly everything became clear. Not confusing. Not complicated. Clear. I pulled free instantly. "You opened that door right now." Instead, Daniel walked into the living room and sat down. Like nothing was happening. Like my child wasn't outside in freezing wind. I unlocked the door immediately. But Eli was gone. The backyard gate swung open in the storm. Snow blowing sideways. No footprints visible anymore. Panic hit me so hard I nearly vomited. I screamed his name into the dark. Nothing answered. Daniel stood behind me suddenly pale. Maybe he's hiding. But I already knew. Eli had run. Not away from punishment. Away from fear. And children only flee homes when home no longer feels safe. We searched for 3 hours. Police joined after 40 minutes. Neighbors. Flashlights. Dogs. Snow kept falling. Every minute felt lethal. I remember standing in the middle of the street, unable to breathe while officers searched drainage ditches. I kept imagining him cold. Alone. Crying for me. At 1:13 a.m. they found him. Curled beneath playground equipment at an elementary school nearly 2 miles away. He had tried to walk to my mother's house. In a blizzard. His hands were blue. His lips gray. Sneakers soaked through. The paramedic later told me something that shattered me completely. He kept apologizing for making everyone mad. Not asking for help. Apologizing. That is what emotional abuse does to children. It teaches them their suffering is inconvenience. At the hospital, doctors worked for hours warming him slowly. Frostbite. Hypothermia. Severe emotional distress. I sat beside the bed while machines beeped softly. Daniel arrived around 3 a.m. The moment Eli saw him, his entire body locked up. Pure fear. Not discomfort. Fear. That was the moment denial died completely. Daniel tried speaking gently. "Buddy." Eli burst into tears so violently monitors started alarming. "Don't make me go home." The nurse immediately stepped between them. "Sir, I need you to step outside." Daniel looked stunned, offended even, like he couldn't understand why a child feared him. That's the thing about people like Daniel. They rewrite reality so thoroughly they begin believing their cruelty is righteousness. A hospital social worker interviewed Eli the next morning. Then me. Then Daniel separately. The questions were calm but sharp. Did Eli often appear anxious around his stepfather? Had there been emotional punishment before? Isolation? Humiliation? Threats? As I answered, memories rearranged themselves into truth. Not isolated incidents. A pattern. A system. A child shrinking year after year inside his own home. By afternoon, Child Protective Services opened an investigation. Daniel was furious. You're letting them paint me as abusive over discipline? I looked at him across the hospital room and finally saw him clearly. Not a monster. Something worse. A man who believed control was love. We are done, I told him quietly. He laughed at first. Thought I was emotional. Then I handed him my wedding ring. His face changed. You're serious? Yes. You're destroying this family over one mistake? No, Daniel. I'm finally protecting my son from 1,000 of them. Leaving was ugly. People always romanticize escape. In reality, it is paperwork and fear and exhaustion. Daniel denied everything. Told friends I was unstable. Claimed Eli was manipulative. Said modern parenting made boys soft. Some people believed him. That hurt less than I expected. Because once you watch your child beg not to go home, public opinion stops mattering. CPS required supervised visitation temporarily during the investigation. Eli refused to attend at first. He'd shake uncontrollably whenever Daniel's name came up. Therapy started twice a week. The therapist used play sessions and drawing exercises. One drawing still lives in my bedside drawer. A tiny rabbit standing beside a giant wolf wearing a human smile. Caption: He only shows teeth when nobody looks. Children understand more than adults realize. The divorce finalized 11 months later. Emotional abuse documentation. Witness statements. Therapist evaluations. Hospital reports. Daniel received limited supervised contact rights contingent on counseling. He blamed me for everything. Never once fully apologized to Eli. Not truly, because accountability requires empathy. And empathy was always the thing he lacked most. Healing was slower than survival. For months, Eli asked permission before eating snacks in our apartment. He apologized after laughing too loudly. Every raised voice made him flinch. Trauma lingers in small behaviors long after danger ends. One night about 6 months later, I found him asleep on the couch holding a blanket tightly against his chest. The television still glowed softly. A children's movie frozen mid-scene. I carried him toward bed carefully. Half asleep, he wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "You came back for me." I nearly broke apart right there in the hallway, because he still remembered that moment at the door. The hesitation. The 5 seconds that felt eternal to him. Children forgive, but they never forget fear. 3 years have passed now. Eli is 12. Tall. Funny. Obsessed with astronomy. He smiles easily again. That took time. Real safety takes time. Sometimes during winter storms he still gets nervous. Still checks locks twice before bed. And every single time I sit beside him until he falls asleep. Because trust is rebuilt through consistency, not promises. If you ask me what lesson I learned, it's this. Love is not measured by how much pain someone survives from you. Love is measured by how safe they feel around you. And no relationship, no marriage, no comfort, no fear of starting over, is worth sacrificing your child's sense of safety. The night Eli almost froze to death, I lost a husband, but I got my son back. And if I had to choose again, I would burn my entire life down to protect him sooner.